to call the roll?
Sorry about that. Call the roll.
Yes, please.
Certainly. Good afternoon, SCTA RCPA Board of Directors. We'll start with Director Melanie Bagby, which I was told will be a little late today. Director Chris Corsi.
Here.
Director Delinda Fisher.
Here.
Director Gerard Giudice.
Here.
Director Sarah Gurney.
Here.
Director Ariel Kelly, I was told would be absent today. Director Mark Landman.
Here.
Director Sandra Lowe. Director David Rabbit.
Here.
Director Rosa Reynosa.
Here.
Vice Chair Linda Hopkins had informed me that she would be absent today. I see Director Melanie Bagby has just joined the call. And then Chair Chris Rogers.
Here. And it does look like we have a quorum. Welcome, everybody. This is our June meeting of Sonoma County Transportation Authority and RCPA. We'll start today with our public comment for non-agenda items. If you have a comment that falls within the jurisdiction of SCTA and RCPA, but it is not on today's agenda, feel free to hit that raise hand feature on Zoom, and I'll turn it over to you, Drew.
All right, let me pull my screen back up. Where'd those buttons go? There you go. So I saw one member of the public who wishes to speak. Eris Weaver, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thanks, Drew. Hi, this is Eris, Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. I just have a little announcement about an upcoming event in July. We are working with the City of Petaluma's Climate Ready campaign to put on a ciclovia event in Petaluma. I have been trying and wanting to get this done for like over 3 years, and COVID got in the way, and I am so excited to have this be happening. It'll be July 17th from 10 to 2. So come out and play in the streets with us. We'll have a good chunk of Petaluma Boulevard downtown closed, and also we'll be connecting up with the Lynch Creek Trail and have a whole variety of different active activities and stuff outside. But mostly the point is to get people who might not otherwise get a chance to have fun walking, cycling, otherwise taking over the streets and seeing other ways that we can use our streets productively. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Eris. Chair Rogers, I do not see any other members of the public with their hands up. I also did not receive any pre-submitted public comments on items not on the agenda.
Okay, great. So we'll move on then to our consent calendar. We have 4 items for today. One is the meeting notes for May 9th. One is the to continue to authorize our teleconference meetings in compliance with AB 361. One is the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition's appropriations for Bike Month. And then one is the establishment of on-call lists for project development services and project program management services. So I'll go ahead and first see if there's any questions on the consent calendar from the board. Let's go to public comment and see if anybody wants to provide any commentary.
Confirming, I do not see any members of the public with their hands up right now.
Okay, then I'll bring it back and I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We've got a motion from Director Giudice and a second from Director Bagby. Any additional comments? All right, Drew, call the vote.
Director Bagby.
Aye.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Fisher.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Gurney.
Aye.
Director Landman.
Aye.
Director Lowe. Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Reynosa.
Aye.
And Chair Rogers.
Aye. Okay, let's go on to item 4.1.
Good afternoon, Chair and Directors. I am here this afternoon to introduce Jenny Berg, who is the Energy Section Director for the Bay Area Metro and is our BayREN manager or lead. And she is here to give an update on BayREN's strategic plan and business plan. So to give you kind of a forward-looking view of what BayREN is planning and what you can expect to see going forward. So with that, I would like to welcome Jenny and turn it over to you.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to present to you. And hopefully, I need to be able to share my screen.
Okay, you're good to go. Sorry
Okay,
about that.
thank you. No problem. Okay. I wanted to take this time to talk about Bay Run looking forward. I know that Tanya and RCPA staff do a good job of keeping you all informed about what's happening with Bay Run. And so I'm going to provide an overview of both our strategic plan as well as our newly filed business plan with the California Public Utilities Commission. So to start off with a little snapshot of some of the regional accomplishments to date, as you can see, there have been a lot of climate-related impacts, but I also wanted to highlight across the region, we've paid over $55 million in incentives to Bay Area single-family and multifamily property owners, as well as have created close to 13,000 new jobs in the green economy. I'm going to highlight just one example of one of our programs, and that's our Codes and Standards program. The goal of this program is to increase energy code compliance. So we do a lot of work with local building officials, providing custom trainings. We pilot permit efforts. And we also work with our local governments to help them, those that are interested in adopting REACH codes. Those are local codes that go above the energy code. We do that by developing templates, staff memos, and helping them through the process. We also leverage our role as a regional implementer and work with some of the regional activities that ABAG is working on, such as providing technical assistance for local government's housing elements. As an example, we drafted language that would fit into the housing elements as it relates to energy. And you can see this picture. This is just an example of one of our regional quarterly forums. And this topic focused on energy efficiency homes in a wildfire-prone region. Turning to a little bit of Sonoma County brags. Our residential programs have had quite significant uptake in the jurisdictions. We have upgraded over 900 single-family homes, paying approximately $1.5 million in incentives. Similarly, our multifamily program has also seen success with upgrading over 1,200 units and paying approximately $1 million in rebates. The Water Upgrade Save, being championed and run by Chris Cohn, who's doing just a fabulous job as the program manager, has successfully enrolled 2 water utilities, both of which are in Sonoma County. We have completed projects, and given the state of the drought, we anticipate significant uptake in partner utility enrollment. Next slide. I wanted to highlight just one program. This is our partnership with Rising Sun Center for Opportunity. And through the Greenhouse Call programs, we work with low-income youth across the region. We have offices set up in each of the counties. And prior to COVID, and obviously we had to pivot during COVID, is that the youth are trained on how to do direct install energy efficiency upgrades. During COVID, we pivoted and the kits were sent by mail, and then the youth would walk the homeowner or renter through the installation process. So here are just some of the highlights from that program. Talking a little bit about Sonoma County connections, and I really want to say that staff from RCPA have really been a model for successful partnerships and working with both county agencies as well as the CCA, Sonoma Clean Power. So RCPA's budget is approximately $1.5 million on an annual basis. Much of that goes to staff time and work as the program lead for the Water Upgrade Save. RCPA staff also works closely with, as you know, the county's Energy and Sustainability Division, and through that have really tapped experts in the different program areas. So some staff have an expertise in codes and standards and a very technical background, while others have really tapped into effective outreach for Sonoma County constituents. And then I always use an example of a model relationship with a CCA is our relationship with Sonoma Clean Power. This picture here is at the Advanced Energy Center, and it was our first in-person Bay Run meeting since COVID, and we had just a fabulous day there having a meeting and then a great tour after our meeting. And we have also been able to model good leveraging of programs with Sonoma Clean Power. As an example, Bay Run is precluded from doing work on electric vehicles. That was a priority of Sonoma Clean Power, and through some additional funding, they were able to layer onto our multifamily program to offer EVs for multifamily properties. So again, a true model in the region where there are 7 CCAs. Turning to the future. So in 2021, we embarked upon and completed the Bay Run 2025 strategic plan. And through that process, we really looked at how we as a regional program comprised of 10 different agencies could more intentionally incorporate equity into our programs as well as our operations. And again, I want to acknowledge Tanya, who served on the strategic planning committee. As you can see, we have a revised mission and a vision for where we want to see ourselves in 2025. We also have identified 4 goals of Bay Run in this process. One is to be a more responsive organization, 2, to address programmatic inequities and barriers, 3, to provide county resources and support, and finally, leverage us as a regional implementer working with regional agencies. Here is the Bay Run's definition of equity, which very much aligns with the ABAG MTC equity platform and also aligns with a revised definition of equity that was issued by the Public Utilities Commission. So also in 2021, the Public Utilities Commission issued a decision that directed all of the program administrators, including Bay Run, to file a new business plan for programs and budget for the time period 2024 to 2031. And as I mentioned, they had in the decision, they directed for the first time kind of a new way of looking at energy efficiency programs. Previously, it was just looked at as the amount of cost-effective energy savings. In the new paradigm, the program administrators are to divide their portfolio into 3 different segments: equity, market support, and resource acquisition. So the CPUC definition very much of equity was very much in alignment with Bay Run's new strategic plan and our definitions. So leading up to the business plan, which was filed in March of this year, we of course looked to our strategic plan and took much of that information to help inform the new business plan. But we spent a lot of time engaging stakeholders throughout the region. This included local government staff, members of the Environmental Social Justice Committee, public health, CBOs, et cetera. And that really helped develop our thinking into what we ultimately filed. Just a very quick summary of what went into our rather lengthy business plan: a new organizational vision that again was aligned with our strategic plan, and a very strong commitment to continuous engagement, listening to our stakeholders. So leading up to it, we, as I mentioned, had quite a lot of engagement, but we are committed to continue to hear from the community and for the customers that our program seeks to serve to ensure that our programs really are addressing their needs. We are proposing 2 new sectors of programs that I'll get into in a moment, as well as a new program in our commercial sector. And then finally, as mentioned in the strategic plan, leveraging what's effective on a regional scale and always following our North Star, which is alignment with the state energy and climate goals. So here on this slide, the blue boxes are our existing programs and the yellow and green boxes are our new programs that I will speak to in a moment. On this slide is what I had mentioned was the breakdown of the market or of the portfolio segmentation. So you can see that over 66% of our entire portfolio is proposed in the equity segment. That represents a budget request of over 101 million or close to 102 million for new programs that are focused within the CPUC definition of equity. And then the market support is at 17%, and then resource acquisition, which is the traditional energy savings program, is 12%. So our new program, so I had talked about the Greenhouse Call program. The Climate Careers is a new offering that will expand the program with the youth to continue to provide training, placement initially in a good paying internship, and then the ultimate goal that the youth will be placed in a permanent good paying job in the green economy. We have 2 programs in the public sector that work with municipal building facilities and staff to help with the decarbonization of municipal buildings. This will include concierge technical assistance, showcasing different technologies, education, and financing options. And then finally, our commercial program is it has an added refrigerant replacement program that will work with very, very small mom and pop food service establishments, replacing the high GWP refrigerants with lower systems. And then last, I wanted to talk about a new initiative that we are launching in anticipation of the business plan being approved. And this is the Bay Area Resilient Libraries Network. We are in kind of our outreach phase, and I will report that both the city of Santa Rosa and the town of Windsor have both signed up for the upcoming webinar, and we anticipate or we hope other jurisdictions in the county will also participate. So this new initiative is open to Bay Area cities and counties, and it was based really on stakeholder input about what local governments and others wanted to see in the new Bay Run business plan. So we've decided to start this initiative, to pilot it, to take lessons learned, build a pipeline of projects so that when the business plan is approved, that we can be up and running. So the initiative will help advance community resilience centers, a key local priority for many local jurisdictions. The initiative builds on our current offering, which is free engineering and technical support to municipal buildings that are interested in becoming zero net energy. So it's kind of an add-on to what we are currently doing. And the goal is to develop a network of Bay Area libraries that can function as community resilience centers. So there's a lot of different names, just like resilience has different meanings, resilient centers have different meanings. We've landed on community resilience centers, and as shown here is how we are defining it. So why libraries? We heard from many of our local government stakeholders that they want their CRCs to be community-led and be at locations that are accessible for the community and welcoming to diverse populations. We chose to focus on libraries as this is consistent with our current funding, and libraries often come up as key community assets. Who doesn't love their public library? The goal has the initiative has 3 goals. The first is to facilitate energy efficiency. That's always at the forefront of all of our program decisions, as we are funded by ratepayer dollars through the energy efficiency proceeding. So we want to ensure that energy efficiency and energy resilience is integrated into local adaptation planning. Second, we want to create a network of community resilience centers across the region that really can share challenges and learn from each other. And then finally, we want to better position our participants for future funding opportunities, whether it be through BayREN or different state agencies that have funding that they may be able to apply for. So some of the benefits of participation, and we will initially select probably 10 for the first phase, is to help facilitate community engagement. This will be done with some of our partner organizations. BayCan is one. We also will offer, or we will provide, free engineering technical assistance and recommendations. This is through the BayREN Codes program to help identify energy upgrades that can be implemented by the library that will result in, better cooling and clean air. Another benefit is that we will work directly with resilience funding and finance experts to help identify relevant funding sources to support the participants and to help implement the recommended energy upgrades. And then finally, the benefit is to join a network of other libraries working to improve the community resilience based on the unique local needs of the participant. So here's just some information about the timeline. The first informational workshop is coming up on June 28th, which will be immediately followed with training on how to do equitable community engagement. July through September will be additional support for those that are interested in filling out the application with the deadline of September 30th for the application. And then the initiative will really be a year-long process. And during that time, we should get a ruling on our business plan, and then we'll be ready to launch the full program. So that is all of my presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Looking for hands from the board. Let's go ahead and start with Director Bagsby.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. There's a lot of opportunity here that I know that all of our communities can take advantage of. But I want to get right down into the library question, and hopefully I'm going to ask questions that are applicable to other jurisdictions. Oh, Sarah, you're probably reading my mind right now. Okay, so and I'm sure you're familiar with the Sonoma County Libraries. Actually, it's a county-wide organization with its own commission, and then of course its governing board is the Board of Supervisors. And then there are some kind of, so that's probably the overall body that needs to be approached. But in addition to that, in a case like the city of Cloverdale, the city actually owns our library building, and Sarah's nodding. And so there would be, there's an opportunity, but it can also, it would be nice if we can clarify if there needs to be a dual process, especially where, building or infrastructure improvements are going to happen. That's probably going to, in our case, it would happen with the city of Cloverdale. But of course, then the overall resiliency program would probably go to the library board and or the Board of Supervisors. So I just want to make sure that when we're going forward and I'm bringing information back to my city, that everybody understands it looks like it's probably going to be a two-pronged process. And then maybe, I don't know if you're ready to, well, I mean, I know that it's its own JPA, but it's under the County of Sonoma's jurisdiction, if I can just clarify that. But So do you know now what the best process will be in that kind of a situation where you have a city who owns the building, but then you have the library commissioners governing the other pieces of the program?
Thank you for the question. And we have been in contact with, is it the Sonoma?
The Sonoma County Library. That's
Yes,
the
and we
entity.
know
Yeah,
that
that's the JPA. Yeah.
Yes, and we have been in touch. This is a new initiative and we want to support everybody that's interested. So we are trying to figure out what that application process would look like for a JPA, but the short answer is yes, we definitely have been in touch and are engaging them.
Yeah, and then on any like facilities questions that would need to go to the owner of the building, which in some cases are the cities, in some cases it isn't. The other piece of it too is I find that it's a great way to, I think you're absolutely right. Libraries are the hub of our communities. We also have a number of other nonprofit organizations, and what comes to mind is in Cloverdale, La Familia Sana, Corazon Healdsburg does a lot of work here as well as in Healdsburg, and then also our senior center is and this is again a case where the city of Cloverdale owns the building, but it's a board that governs the programs. So it does need to be kind of a two-prong approach. And I just want to, find out is that being taken into consideration as far as your outreach and understanding? In some cases, it has to be a two-pronged process. And then also, is this program available for other organizations, other nonprofits, or other like very important organizations in our small rural communities that will get the word out? There's certainly a lot of overlap between the library and our senior center, but they're two separate populations that they do serve.
Yeah, excellent point. So we're starting off small and we have identified libraries as kind of the initial pilot, lessons learned, and then consistent with our charter from the CPUC that we pilot activities that have the potential to be scaled. So great suggestions, and definitely keep that in mind. And in terms of the library coalition, I mean, just completely thinking out loud, I mean, you gave Cloverdale as an example that maybe the library is in the city of Cloverdale, but the applicant is the JPA. So these are all things
the
that
building,
we have to work out.
The building is the property of the city of Cloverdale, but the library commission, governs the Sonoma County libraries. And so if there's anything that is specific to the building, which I certainly hope I heard you correctly, that it would be a center for resiliency and possibly infrastructure improvement, the city would definitely be interested in that. And so that's what I'm saying, is that it really has to be a parallel process coming into small rural areas like ours. And I think that this situation exists in other municipalities as well. And so it's just, as long as there's a way that we're aware of that, we can move forward knowing it's a two-pronged approach. That's just going to be really important going forward.
Thank you.
So to Director Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Rogers. Thank you for the presentation, Jenny. And I had a question about one of your slides, the impacts in Sonoma County that you've had. You said to date, and when did they start?
So we've been implementing programs since January of 2013. So we are just about to have our 10-year anniversary. So those impacts were cumulative to date.
Got it. I don't know if you know anything about the Cool City Challenge that we have going on here in Petaluma, the Cool Block program. We've got, almost 1,000 people participating now and doing energy upgrades to their homes and other things. And I'm wondering how those members can provide feedback to your organization. We're hearing on the ground some feedback that I think would be excellent to get back to your ears somehow.
That would be great. So the way that BayREN is structured is that we have one county agency for each of the counties. And so my recommendation is to work with Tanya or Chris Cohn to provide that feedback. And then that's channeled to the program manager of a particular program. Often it's elevated to kind of the whole 10 county collaborative.
Great, thank you.
Director Kearney.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Jenny, for your information. Yes, Melanie did steal my thunder there. So I'll just underscore what she said. Sebastopol has a library that is considered our community living room. It is really a beloved facility owned by the city. It's across a parking lot from the senior center, which also has a tremendous West County constituency. We have a third organization, which is our community center, which has so many cultural activities, which also draws from a wide age group. And I'm thinking particularly the pair that are geographically centered next to City Hall, by the way, another city-owned building on the property. They are greatly paired up, I think, for this program. So I just want to encourage you to look to our situations that we share, because I think they're familiar to some degree, even in the big cities. I'm wondering too, just how much do you expect from the library staff itself? We have a very engaged branch manager. We have librarians whom people love and know by name and can't wait to see in person on a daily basis. How much will the library staff be involved? Do you need a point person, or what exactly? How do they interface with you if selected in a pilot?
There's definitely a commitment on the part of staff. So it's going to be very much driven by the particular library. And we're learning a lot through this process about all of the resources for libraries, as well as I'm blanking on the type of plan that they have to have. So this is not going to be a top-down approach. We are going to provide the resources to each of the library participants to help them with their own individual community goals. I mean, they know, your constituents better than, a regional program administrator. So this really, really will be driven by each of the applicant for exactly the reasons that you mentioned.
Great, thank you so much, Jenny. Are there any other questions from board members? Okay, let's go to public comment on this item. If you're interested, hit the raise hand feature on your Zoom. Drew, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, I'll take this. Let's see, we'll start with, I see two members with their hands up right now. We'll start with the John Shreds. John, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Right, thank you. Excellent presentation again. Really nice to have the libraries involved. Some of the other things that caught my attention in your presentation was the need to hit equity, as well as multi-housing units, as well as transportation. Those are three key things. And I'm part of the general plan advisory committee for the city of Petaluma, plus a few other things. But one of the things I've done recently is investigated and researched micro-mobility and how that can be applied. I'm predicting that in 10 years, with electrification of transport, that micro-mobility in small, tiny micro cars, as even trikes and the like, are going to become popular in 10 years. And I would like to BayREN to think about a pilot projects now to get this movement moving. And that if you could select a few sites, maybe libraries, and then maybe multifamily units, pick one or two here and there. And if we could get a ride share micromobility program in a multi-housing in an equitable situation as a promo, maybe get this is being done in Europe in a couple of places. If we get that started here as an initiative, so that the owners of the apartments, buildings could come out, and 4 to 10 slots would be micro cars charged by 110, not 220. They only need 110. So it'd be a lot cheaper to do 110 volts charging stations than 220s. And if there was a set of 4 to 5 vehicles, that would be shared by 20 people in that apartment building, and a rideshare program using phones, apps, that would be a really good pilot project to think about. If we even get one location going just as a test case, as an initiative, using with Bay Area looking at it entirely, hopefully maybe up here in Sonoma, maybe even right down my block at the HUD housing. I've got twice as many cars trying to park in this spaces right now, filling up my spaces all along the streets. So that would be an excellent example to try to get something working on. But any other location within the Bay Area or Sonoma County would also work very well. So 110 volt system with micro cars, ride share combination, all completely funded and paid for as a pilot project. Under $500,000 could do the whole thing. and as a pilot project and really be the example to show the whole community here where we can go and what we can do by switching over, getting out of our larger gas cars into smaller electric vehicles. So that's a proposal I'd just like to make to you to think about and see if you can get something going in the next couple of years as your next initiative that could be even tied in after the library says, okay, if we get folks educated, this is where we need to go. We need to set up pilot projects around the whole Bay Area. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Schmitz. Next in line, I see Steve Bertelbaugh. Steve, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you, Jenny. This was a good presentation. I want to second everything you've just heard. I live in a retirement community where we do have a climate crisis committee that's working. And I'd like to see you target retirement communities for this educational process. We happen to have a 5,000 volume library, which is very good, but we're independent of the county library and actually contribute the books that we can't use that get donated to us to the county library. Keep your eye on retirement communities because there is a great place for education and we pass our information along to our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
Great, I'll bring it back to the group and see if anybody has any additional comments. All right, go ahead, Director Bagby.
Thank you. Just can we make sure that we get Jenny's contact information and number and a copy of the slide deck?
Please, thank you, Melanie.
I think we can
Thank
do
you.
that. All right, thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank you
Move
all.
on to let's move on to our next item. It's item 4.2. It's a state policy update. I'll turn it over to Suzanne.
Sorry, it's actually going to be Tanya. Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And let's see, let me get my slides going here. So thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on the recently released California Air Resources Board draft 2022 scoping plan. So in terms of the agenda, talk briefly about the issue, background, go over at a high level the scoping plan scenarios. I'll talk about the alignment with our Sonoma climate mobilization and then the recommendations that staff has for you today. So in terms of the issue, I'll share the status of the draft scoping plan, talk about alignment, and then we have a couple of recommendations in terms of comments. So first, in terms of background on the AB 32 climate change scoping plan. So this is a requirement of AB 32, and the first scoping plan was developed in 2008, and the plan must be updated at least every 5 years. And these updates to the plan provide an opportunity to assess the progress that the state is making towards our state goals, revise the actions that we're taking, and defining new actions as we learn more about what it will take to meet our targets. So CARB adopted the most recent scoping plan in 2017, and this update evaluated progress toward the AB 32 goal of returning to 1990 levels of greenhouse gas emissions by 2020, and then provided a feasible path that's technologically feasible and cost effective to achieve the SB 32 target of reducing GHG emissions by at least 40% below 1990 levels by 2030. So in terms of the progress that the state has made, CARB released its latest statewide GHG inventory for the year 2019 in 2021. And this inventory continued to show that we met the state goal for 2020 of returning to 1990 emissions. And that was done in 2016. And since then, California has maintained its emissions below that level. And there's been mostly a downward trend since 2004. And as you may recall, the Sonoma County goal is more ambitious than the state. For 2020, our goal was to be 25% below 1990 levels. And we'll find out soon when we release our 2020 inventory, how close we've come to meeting that goal. And just as a reminder, when we did the 2018 inventory, our emissions had dropped 13% below 1990 levels. So still lots of work to do. So lastly, in terms of the timeline for the draft scoping plan, it was released on May 10th for public comment and review. The CARB board will review the plan and take public comment at a public meeting on June 23rd, and then we expect adoption by the end of 2022. So in terms of what's new in the scoping plan update, for the first time, it models scenarios for carbon neutrality in either 2035 or 2045. And it also evaluates the carbon sequestration potential on our natural and working lands. CARB looked at 4 scenarios and modeled those to develop this draft scoping plan. And the objective was to model the most, or to inform the most viable path to remain on track to achieve the 2030 goal and then achieve carbon neutrality by 2045 at the latest. And in evaluating these scenarios, CARB took into consideration key constraints, which included looking at the time to grow the electricity grid to be the backbone for a decarbonized economy and the costs and impact to our equity communities. So the plan acknowledges the need for transformative action now and over the next number of years, but the 2045 goal that it sets falls short of what many of us feel is possible and required by the science. So a quick overview of the how CARB looks at the net GHG emissions and absorption of CO2 in the sinks. And so it actually, in the scoping plan, evaluated 2 sets of scenarios. So one looking at what's referred to as the GHG inventory scenarios, which are shown here on the left side of your slide. So in the transportation, fossil fuel production, industry, and energy generation. And then second, looked at scenarios for carbon sequestration potential on natural and working lands. And you see that they're represented both as a source and a sink for natural and working lands. And that's because natural and working lands can emit carbon through wildfires, disease, land management practices, so they can be actually an emitter of carbon, and they can also be a sink or an absorber of carbon. And so CARB looked at both scenarios for natural and working lands. So first, looking at the 4 scenarios that are evaluated for the GHG inventory sectors, this shows a high-level summary of those 4 scenarios. And looking at alternatives 1 and 2, these are the 2 that target carbon neutrality in 2035. And alternative 1 achieves this by nearly completely phasing out all oil and gas combustion in the state. So that's a very ambitious goal by 2035. And then alternative 2 focuses more on an aggressive deployment of a full suite of technology and energy options, and then relies more on engineered carbon removal, so pulling carbon out of the air through mechanical and other means. So those are the 2 2035 scenarios, and the 2 2045 scenarios, alternatives 3 and 4, with alternative 3 being the proposed scenario. Alternative 3 uses a portfolio approach and is most aligned with existing state statutes and executive orders. And then alternative 4 deploys a similar approach, but relies on slower adoption rates for new technologies than the proposed scenario, and therefore has to rely more heavily on the engineered carbon dioxide removal. So here's a slide showing a high-level comparison of the different alternatives for the GHG inventory sector. And so looking at the proposed scenario relative to the other scenarios considered, the proposed scenario has the lowest cost and economic impact in 2045. It delivers fewer health benefits, and that's really because it does not phase out the burning of fossil fuels as quickly as some of the other alternatives do. And it does not reduce the GHG or fossil fuel demand as much as those 2 alternatives that aim for carbon neutrality by 2035. So now moving on to the topic of carbon removal and sequestration, I wanted to share this slide with you just because there's a number of different ways that carbon can be removed from the atmosphere, and to highlight that for the mobilization strategy, what we focus on is the nature-based solution, so the sequestration in the natural and working lands. But the CARB scoping plan really looks at all of these different strategies as viable options for removing carbon. So looking briefly at carbon capture and storage, that's what you would see attached to a facility. So for example, a petroleum refining facility or a cement production plant. The idea here would be to use technology attached to that facility to capture the carbon and then store it safely away. And so there's a lot of technology and a fairly new approach there. And then on the carbon dioxide removal side, that's not attached to any particular source of carbon dioxide. It's really pulling it out of the ambient air. And there's two sets of strategies, the mechanical strategies and the nature-based. So mechanical can include direct air capture with sequestration and bioenergy with carbon capture and storage. So direct air capture can be done through either chemical means, so pulling in air into a facility and using a chemical reaction to remove the carbon dioxide, or to put the carbon dioxide through a filter, which captures the carbon, and then that can be stored away. And then bioenergy with CCS is basically taking biomass and using that to generate energy, and again, using CCS technology to capture any emissions from that process. So we plan to come back to the board later this year with a more in-depth review of both what we're looking at for the Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy around the nature-based sequestration strategies, as well as some of these other opportunities or areas that are being looked at. So stay tuned for more on that. So next, I want to just give a brief overview of the 4 scenarios that CARB evaluated for the natural and working lands. And again, a similar pattern here where there were 4 alternatives, and it's the alternative 3 that is being proposed. So alternative 1 basically takes a fairly hands-off approach for forests and other landscapes to maximize short-term carbon stock. So basically keeping what's there in place while maintaining current fire suppression levels. It does include a significant increase in the amount of croplands that are converted to organic by 2045. And also, and this is, I think, important for us to consider, a significant increase in statewide urban forest investment to maximize carbon storage in urban forests. And this is an area that RCPA is doing some work on. Alternative 2 basically focuses on continuing California's current commitments and plans in this area. Alternative 3, the proposed scenario, really attempts to balance a number of different considerations in terms of keeping carbon stored in the landscapes, but also doing more fire, active vegetation management and other types of land management to increase sequestration. And then lastly, alternative 4 is really the one that focuses as the highest priority on reducing wildfires in forests and other landscapes. Now moving on to how these different scenarios align, or how the proposed scenario, I should say, aligns with the mobilization strategy. This is an overview of the major strategies from the mobilization strategy compared with the draft scoping plan proposed scenario. And as you can see, the draft scoping plan does support many of the strategies that we are working on here locally. I'll call out that the VMT reduction that's being included or proposed as part of this scenario is a very big stretch for Sonoma County. It's definitely what we need to do, but just to call out that that's a very ambitious VMT reduction goal, and happy to share more about that if there are questions. So the main difference really between the scoping plan proposed scenario or one big difference, I should say, and our mobilization strategy is the goal of being carbon neutral by 2045 rather than 2030, which is what we have in our plan. And also a number of our local jurisdictions have also set that as their goal for 2030. And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier, the mobilization strategy does not include any strategies related to carbon capture and storage or direct air capture. So we again look only to the nature-based solutions for sequestration. And then here are our Sonoma Climate Mobilization sequestration strategies and the strategies that are proposed as part of the scenario. And I would say these are, fairly consistent, although to achieve our goals for sequestration, we're going to need to be more ambitious than the goals that are set out in the proposed scenario. And again, highlighting the focus on urban forestry and developed lands. And so this is an area that we are doing some work on currently with each of the jurisdictions. And then lastly, in terms of the plan, there is an appendix that highlights actions that local governments can take to address climate. And really, we are looking at all of these. If you look at our strategy, both between the mobilization strategy and the recently updated comprehensive transportation plan, you'll find pretty much all of these touched upon in one way or another. So just to note that Sonoma County is already taking action and making plans consistent with what CARB has identified in its local section of the plan. So now I wanted to share just a couple of the reactions that I have seen to the release of the draft scoping plan. And I think the common theme here is that the plan doesn't go far enough, fast enough to meet what we feel is the scientific imperative. And so the first quote here is from an op-ed that Daniel Kamen, who's a very well-respected UC Berkeley professor of sustainability, really highlighting that the plan still calls for investment in fossil fuel resources. So as an example, it calls for 10 gigawatts of new natural gas generating capacity, the equivalent of 33 new large gas plants. It also makes assumptions or factors in assumptions around the social cost of carbon, and actually, in Daniel's mind, understates the benefit to the economy and to our health of moving faster in ramping down fossil fuel emissions, for example. And also that moving faster, he feels, would lead to a stronger economy. So some of the cost impacts he feels are overstated. And then lastly, too much reliance on the carbon capture technology that I mentioned earlier. There aren't many examples of this actually operating, and the plan has some pretty ambitious goals around ramping up that technology. So a lot of questions around whether that's really feasible or not. And then there was a letter that was sent to CARB from 73 environmental justice groups. And again, stating that the plan is not aggressive enough. It delays the phase out of oil extraction to 2045, which is really an issue for our frontline communities because they bear the brunt of the impacts of oil extraction, refining, et cetera. So really wanting to see CARB move more aggressively towards a goal nearer term. So in conclusion, the recommendation that we have as staff for the board to consider, we see many good aspects of this plan. So there's extensive modeling and analysis included in the draft scoping plan. We're very pleased to see the inclusion of sequestration on natural and working lands as an important addition. And as I mentioned, the plan is aligned with many of the strategies within our Sonoma climate mobilization. But we would like to request that CARB proposes an alternative that achieves carbon neutrality no later than 2035. Certainly, we'd like to see 2030, but statewide, that may not be a viable alternative. So we definitely want to see something at least by 2035. So that concludes my presentation, and I'll turn it back to you, Mr. Chair, for questions and comments from the board.
All right, thank you so much, Tanya. We'll go to Director Fisher.
Thank you. I think we need to be much more strong in our language to the state and be really clear about our local goals and everything that we're doing and how we really need them to be aligned with us. Yes, I agree that maybe they can't reach it by 2035, by 2030, but we should ask for that, I think. And I was really disappointed in I did read, 110 pages of it, I guess, and then skip to the end. But, I think the work that they're doing around equity is really good and very strong, but I just think that they are sort of going backwards in some respects, and certainly not going forward quickly like we need to do. So, so that's what I would like to offer.
All right, any other questions or comments from directors? Director Landman. Once you unmute, that is.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll save my comments for after public comment, but I did want to ask a question. I noticed that staff did suggest, and I support certainly at minimum, asking for an alternative from CARB that perhaps gets closer to our 2030, at least to a 2035 carbon neutral date. The question I had earlier before we got to that point was, what would the staff proposal be? I noticed that CARB is going with 3. If staff was choosing from the 4 that were proposed, would it be 1 or 2? Or is the feeling from staff that 1 or 2, as currently constituted, just don't quite work, ideally?
That's a great question, and we haven't delved into which of it would be obviously 1 or 2, and I think we would need to really give some more thought to the implications of alternative 1, because that is the alternative that one of the main differences is that in terms of building electrification, it would set a date for replacement of equipment. So rather than in alternative 2, which says that we'll replace equipment at end of life, it would ask for replacement of equipment sooner. And so there's obviously cost and equity concerns with that. So I think we'd want to understand that a bit more before just going fully behind that alternative. But certainly one of those two would be, or some combination of those two would be the preference.
Okay, because I do think the board, I know my thought was, and I suspect a lot of the rest of the board's thought was, we would like to support something perhaps a little stronger than what's being proposed as it's the best of four from CARB, but we're trying to nail it down that. So perhaps beyond simply just the asking them for an earlier date, are there any other particular asks that you would recommend to help achieve that goal without doing that deeper dive that the board could support today? Might be valuable. Is there anything that jumps out yet, or is it just too early to be able to do that without really spending some time?
Yeah, maybe the obvious one is around the funding. So, CARB listed out actions that local jurisdiction can take, and we certainly have our mobilization strategy and just really continuing to enforce the need for additional local funding to actually implement the recommendations that are coming out of this. So whether it's the building electrification, the transportation side, it's really, we have a really strong idea of what needs to be done. And much of what they're proposing in those first two alternatives, and actually I should say with the first alternative, because the second one does include the mechanical carbon dioxide removal, which we haven't as an agency really looked into in depth. And that's the area that we want to do some more research and have discussion with the board about what kind of a position to take there.
And real quick, because I know I'm going on with this, where are they specifically looking and funding for some of these measures? Is that nailed down yet, or is that being left to be dealt with afterwards? Because it strikes me that might be important to know.
Yeah, it's not addressed in the plan itself. So yeah, the plan would certainly guide other state level decisions around policy and funding, but it's not outlined in the plan itself.
Okay, great. Well, I do have some comments for you on woody biomass, but I think that's just going to have to wait till after public comment. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director. Let's go to public comment then and see if anybody would like to provide input. Drew, let's start with Steve and then go to John.
There you go. Computer's freezing on me. My apologies. All righty, Steve. I permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you. Steve Bertlebo with the Transportation Land Use Coalition. I appreciate the staff's analysis of this. It's very succinct, and I've been trying to understand it for the last 3 weeks, and it's really a lot to dive through. I agree that we should press CARB to be more aggressive. We have little time to waste. I would like to see us emphasize the need to reduce vehicle miles traveled. I think that we can be much more efficient in that, particularly the shift to small vehicles and electric bikes. I really like the staff recommendation, and hope we can be heard. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. Next I have in line is John Shribs. John, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. So besides being within the general plan, I'm also president of Petaluma Wetlands Alliance and also a leader within the Relief Petaluma group, where we're trying to plant trees here within the city. We have a 10,000 tree initiative going. And what I really want to emphasize is what was said in the presentation about nature-based solutions. After listening to lots of different speakers this last 2 years, that is economically, resilient-wise, the best long-term solution, and that's really great. But we need to be clear, when you say nature-based solutions, it sounds nice, but what does it mean in practicality? And so there's 3 areas we need to work on: sea level rise and saving our marshlands, because in the marshlands, to save carbon in the marshlands, we need to have plants out there not inundated by sea level rise. So we really need to work on saving all the marshlands around the whole Bay Area. And I know that's being worked on. Another area is grasslands. Grass is even better than trees if you have native bunch grasses. So maybe conversion of some of our cow pastures may best be served. See if we can get people to convert over to a native grass swards with some native oak trees, turning those back into natural savannas as much as possible the way it was 150 to a couple thousand years ago. So that's another way of doing it. And then a third way is, of course, planting trees. Again, water shortages may be of concern locally, but we need to get as many trees for carbon sequestration going within our cities and urban forestry throughout the whole Bay Area. I know we're leading the way here in Petaluma, trying to get urban forestry pumped up and moving forward with, we have some grants that we've gotten from both CAL FIRE and Relief to do that. And so I would really promote planting trees. Urban forestry throughout all the cities of the Bay Area need to be emphasized as part of the natural solutions, but natural solutions are not fast, they are slow, and they do take a long time and a lot of effort. So I just want us to be clear on, when you say natural solutions, there's no magic wand out there, and you need to work on these long-term solutions in a very community, broad regional basis way. And I think that's the way we're all going. What I'm hearing from many of the Bay Area organizations on waters, on plants and trees and parks, we're all moving in the same direction. So I'm highly encouraged that we're going to get there with these nature-based solutions. But it is going to be a lot of work and a lot of convincing of folks, because there's no easy solution. But thank you for your time.
All right, thank you, John. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak.
All right, I'll go ahead and bring it back. And I know Director Landman had comments, so I'll go to him first. And I'll see if anybody else would like to join him.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I wanted to comment a little bit about something I did find in the draft scoping plan. And I think we might have all noticed of late, I think we did notice in Sonoma Clean Power late last year, some response to a generalized push we see towards a greater usage of the forestries for power. Yes, actually burning trees to provide power, but other marketable items under, good sounding, environmentally friendly terms such as smart management, harvesting. And when I looked on page, 205 of the draft scoping plan, I did find some of that talking about removing woody biomass from the forest to use it as storage and durable wood products, using it as soil amendments and other mediums. So we're turning this into basically marketable items. Talks about expanding infrastructure into the forest, which is always, any of us who have followed logging and those various things for years know that's kind of something to watch carefully. And then it also talks about expanding permit streamlining, which is really kind of a big concern. As we know, that's sometimes it's a good thing to do, but you have to know what you're doing before you open that door. So I would be very concerned about it. I just generally think the concern is it's not always waste, woody waste. We understand that economic pressures, once you create roads and infrastructure in to harvest, that can be a problem. It can change. And also the thing that we do know is that the removal of habitat and nutrients from the forest is problematic. And down trees do naturally provide both. There's whole ecosystems that live at each stage of a tree's decay, and obviously it provides nutrients to a forest, and healthy forests do absorb and retain more carbon. So without going on about it, I just don't think that RCPA should be supporting or agreeing to the increase of infrastructure into forests to remove trees for economic profit, certainly for power generation. I think we just know better than that in the 21st century, although there is something to be said for forest management and certainly increased planning. So I'd like to suggest that we send a comment of opposition for increasing harvesting from forests for commercial products and energy production, as well as a comment of concern and opposition to increasing infrastructure to facilitate those actions. At least if my colleagues on the board agree. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And that sounded a little bit like a motion.
Well, there might be other things that people want to add. If you want to make it a motion and keep it open for discussion so other people can add things, because I don't know if we've nailed down where we want to go in terms of staff recommendations to add to this, but yeah, I'd be happy to make it a motion, Mr. Chair.
All right, and you're moving the rest of the recommendations from staff as well?
Yes, I am.
Perfect.
Yes, I am.
Let's see if there's a second.
There's a second, but change the goal to 2035 to 2030.
Is that acceptable to the motion?
The friendly.
not only friendly, but a good idea. If there's a way to do it, I'm certainly up to it. I will admit, practically, I think that's awfully short. But for this, our goal should be high. So yeah, I like that.
All right, we'll go to Director Gurney. There's a motion and a second on the table, but we'll do discussion still.
Well, thank you, because I've been trying to get this comment in. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you to our public speakers and also the directors. I agree with everything I've heard. And Gerard, Rohnert Park, I especially appreciate you advancing this to 2030. My comment is one of a very personal nature. And now that I'm almost 70, I look at everything from that perspective. And I'll share with you, I was at an event last night with author Annie Lamont, where the question was asked, why would anybody have a child, bring a child into this world now where we have climate catastrophe, incredibly violent war of genocide, we're faced with drought, flooding, pandemic. And so I won't take time going into the answer, which now you really want to hear, but it made me think of my grandson, my oldest grandson. By 2035, he's going to be 18. By 2045, he's going to be 28, both childbearing ages. And I'm going, I can't wait for my grandchildren to be invited into a world way that longer that will have these ongoing problems. We've just got a duty to them to address these problems way sooner, not way later. So that's where I appreciate advancing the time from 2045 to 2035, now down to 2030. That's where I am for my great grandchildren.
All right, thank you, Director. We'll go to Director Fisher.
As something that occurred to me that we wouldn't include in our Sonoma County plan. Well, maybe we would, because we are on the coast. That nobody's talking about using our waters for sequestration, and that in fact has been where most of our carbon is going. And our waters cannot absorb it any longer, but we can do things like seaweed capture and things like that. So we might recommend to the state that they look at that option. It might be easier than trying to mechanically bring the carbon out of the air.
Is that a suggestion for adding it into the letter?
That would be.
I'll check with the motion in the second and see if there's any opposition.
As the mover, any recommendation from the board, as long as we don't have recommendations in opposition, I'm supportive of.
I'm fine as well.
Perfect. All right, I appreciate the letter, Tanya. I think that it is smart for us to push a little bit further, to drag folks along with us with our ambitious goals that we have here in Sonoma County. And Director Gurney, I'm gonna piggyback on what you said, because you triggered it for me. But I just got back from a couple of conferences that I was at, and one of the questions that they had polling data on was actually around why are younger folks not having as many kids, or at least having them later? And exactly that answer that you're giving, fear for the future as it pertains to climate, is now at an all-time high. And so I'm with you on that one. I think that we keep pushing forward. I think we change it to 2030, since that's what all of our goals are across our jurisdiction. And let's, whether feasible or not, whether folks think we can get there or not, we have to. So let's just keep pushing. Director Fisher?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that there is a campaign that was started by the Center for Biological Diversity that I forwarded on to Tanya if you want to have your constituents send a note to the governor about this.
Perfect. Thank you. So we have a motion. We have a second. Drew, let's go ahead and call the vote.
Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Landman,
Yes.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
That passes.
Okay. Looks like that's clear direction for you, Tanya.
It is. Thank you very much. Get to work on that letter.
Okay, let's move on to our next item. It's 4.3. It's our 2022 Strategic Implementation Plan for Measure M. Is it you, Suzanne, or is it James?
It's to
Oh, it's
David Ripper.
David.
Yes.
I just can't get them right today.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and Directors. This afternoon, I'll be presenting the 2022 Measure M Strategic Implementation Plan update. So the layout of the document mirrors that of the 2022 implementation plan. And so it has 5 sections that we're going to be going over in this presentation today: the background, strategic approach, policies, cash flow model, and project details. So in 2004, the SCTA adopted the Comprehensive Transportation Plan, which served as the backbone of the Measure M expenditure plan. And in November 2004, the voters of Sonoma County passed Measure M. In general, the Measure M plan provides funding for 7 program categories as follows: local bus transit, local streets projects, local street rehabilitation, Highway 101, administration, rail, and bicycle and pedestrian projects. In 2005, the SCTA Board of Directors passed the first strategic plan, known as the 2005 Measure M strategic plan. The plan defined the management of the programmatic elements of Measure M, defined the role of the Measure M project sponsor, created basic financial policies, looked at initial revenue forecast, and provided a funding schedule for the first 5 years of the measure. The strategic plan implemented the initial Measure M policies, such as audit and reporting requirements, and provided resources and information for our project sponsors. So now I'm going to talk about the strategic approach for this Measure M strategic plan update. So as required by the voters, the strategic plan has to be updated every 5 years. The last update was approved by the board back in November 2019. And for this update in 2022, we're adding the word implementation to the plan. This is to differentiate between a strategic plan, which really looks at the what and why, and a strategic implementation plan, which also looks at the who, where, when, and how the plan moves forward. This plan is based on fiscal year 2020-2021 financials and includes the program approved by the board in May of 2021. Plan also includes the latest policies the board approved on maintenance of effort and loans. For this 2022 strategic implementation plan, or SIP, we looked at a sales tax revenue forecast that looks at consistent annual growth in line with long-term historical sales tax growth averages. This forecast demonstrates a conservative approach through the end of the measure in March of 2025, and sufficient programming capacity was available for all program requests from the jurisdictions. As you can see in the table on the right here, our forecast is very close to the original forecast from 2004 at 452.5 million compared to the original forecast of 470 million. Really, the difference in this forecast is due to the impact of the Great Recession and the loss of revenue from 2008 to 2012. The overall revenue forecast for the remaining years of the program is 3% annually, and due to the robust growth coming out of the recession and leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic, we've been able to recover 96% of our original forecasted revenue. In 2020, the voters approved the renewal of Measure M through the Go Sonoma measure. This measure will begin in 2025 and ends in 2045 and includes our goals for Go Sonoma, including smooth and maintained roads, move traffic and improve safety, increase bus service, affordability, and connections for first and last mile for transit, and also build bikeways and pathways. The strategic plan includes a revenue forecast for the first time for Go Sonoma. As you can see on the left here, in the yellow is the actual revenue received under Measure M, the projected revenue through 2025 in green, and starting in 2025, the transition in blue to the Go Sonoma measure, which includes a revenue forecast of 3% growth annually through 2035 and slowing to 2% after that. Now I'm going to talk about the policies that are contained in the strategic plan. The strategic implementation plan includes a number of policies governing how the plan is administered and how funding is distributed for projects. It includes looking at the annual apportionment programs, use of pay-as-you-go financing, loans, including the new policy the board recently adopted on air fund loans for Go Sonoma, and also looks at how cooperative agreements and appropriations are dealt with for specific projects. It also looks at advancing funds for future reimbursement, timely invoicing, cost guidelines, project delivery, annual reporting letters, public information, and also looks at maintenance of effort, as we recently had the approved item recently by the board to look at updating the maintenance of effort and also implementing that for the first time. The last policies included audits, investment of cash balances, and bicycle pedestrian project combination of all projects, multi-jurisdictional projects, amendments to the Measure M strategic plan, and amendments to the expansion plan for adding new projects, and adoption of future policy amendments to the strategic plan. The strategic plan includes a cash flow model that looks at all the different funding programs. I know this table is far too small to look at, but in our staff report, we have a link to the actual document in case you want to review these tables. But it has in chapter 5 of the plan models for all the programs, including the Highway 101 program, local streets projects program, local streets rehabilitation program, local bus transit program, the passenger rail program, bicycle and pedestrian projects program, administration, and also a summary of all the different funding programs. And should note that based on the projected revenues and expenditures through the end of the program, we're looking at a fund balance of $53 million by the end of the program. So we have a robust reserve and room for adding additional projects based on the program capacity. Going over the project details, I will talk about the 4 different project-specific programs, including Highway 101, local streets projects, bicycle pedestrian projects, and passenger rail. On the Highway 101 corridor, we are nearing completion of the program with the exception of default landscaping on some sections of the corridor. The final section of the highway widening on the Marin Sonoma Narrows in Sonoma County is nearing completion and should be complete by the end of the year. For local street projects, there are several projects that have been completed and other ones that are in various stages of delivery. I should note for the Pengrove project, we recently on last Friday had a kickoff meeting with Sonoma County Transportation Public Works and their consultant on the planning efforts they're leading for the Pengrove and the Railroad Avenue corridor, and hope to have that planning study done in the next year. Other projects that are recently starting are the Fulton Road widening in the city of Santa Rosa has recently been awarded for construction. And as shown here in the image, the Airport Boulevard construction at the Smart Tracks has recently been completed. For bicycle and pedestrian projects, we have 16 different projects. Some of these have been delivered, including the last segment of Foss Creek Pathway in the city of Healdsburg. Other projects are still underway, including the Arnold Drive Bike Lanes project. Lastly, for the project-specific categories, the SMART train has completed their first operating segment. The remaining Measure M funds are available for the final design of the Healdsburg extension and are planned to extend in the future fiscal year. And with that, I'm open for any questions you have, and staff recommends that you approve the 2022 Measure M Street Plan.
All right, board, are there any questions for David? Director Landman.
Yeah, again, an incredibly handsome document, not a surprise with what SCTA puts out, and it was really good reading to see how much would actually been accomplished through Measure M. No doubt that's the reason Measure D passed so handily. So I enjoyed looking through all the past projects that we completed. I think that was good history. And one thing that jumped out is one big project that's still kind of waiting to get a start. I wondered if we could get an update on, and that would be the interchange improvements at Highway 101 and Railroad. And I asked that simply because you know that earmarked funds are always vulnerable perhaps to being reused if they languish for any reason. And I thought that recently we did get a start on planning. So I wonder if we could just update on that particular project, if possible.
Certainly, Director. So as I mentioned earlier, we are working with Sonoma County Transportation and Public Works on a planning study in the Pengrove area that is specifically looking at the Railroad Avenue corridor. We anticipate that study being completed either by the end of this calendar year or if it's delayed by the end of the fiscal year. Once that study is complete, there is $1 million as shown in the street plan program to start work on the Railroad Avenue interchange, looking at additional scoping and feasibility studies that need to be done first. And so we anticipate once the planning study is done in Pengrove, we can start work on the interchange project.
That's excellent news. Happy to hear it. I think that would be greatly beneficial to Pengrove, Rohnert Park, and certainly Cotati as well. So thank you for that.
Director Reynosa?
Yeah, just a quick question. I want to make sure I heard correctly or read it correctly. There's no more planned 101 widening in Sonoma County?
Correct.
After this last project?
Yes, we're completing the final section.
Or is there other widening projects in the plans?
At this time, there's no widening plan further between Windsor and the Sonoma County line. The last segment south of Petaluma and north of Novato is in Marin County, and that section is starting construction this summer.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? All right, let's go to public comment.
I currently do not see any members of the public who wish to speak on this item, Chair Rogers.
Nor do I, Drew. So we'll go ahead and bring it back, and I'm looking for a motion.
So moved.
I'd be happy to second that, Mr. Chair.
I have a motion from Director Reynosa with a faster, fewer words second from Director Bagby. So we'll give it to her on this one. Are there any additional comments? All right, great work to the team. Let's go ahead and call the vote.
All right, Director Bagby.
Aye.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Fisher.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Gurney.
Aye.
Director Landman.
Aye.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Reynosa.
Aye.
And Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Great. Let's move on to item 4.4 then.
And while Shauna is being brought in for this item, I think she's up next. Is that right, Drew?
Okay, she's coming in.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, directors. So the next item before you is the federal obligation histories. A year ago at this time, the board approved biannual updates to the federal funding history of each of the jurisdictions in order to remain apprised of delivery status of the programmed projects. And that was agreed to be brought to the board in June and November. So the histories in the agenda packet have been updated and verified by the Technical Advisory Committee. They are particularly relevant now because the delivery history is something that is considered when selecting projects for the One Bay Area grant funding by MTC. And staff will be bringing recommendations for the SCTA funding program, which includes the One Bay Area grant, next month. So we wanted to make sure that you had this context in order to move forward with the recommendations. So updates to the list are that were made since November are shown in red for facility of reading. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Let's go to public comment.
Confirming, I do not see any members of the public who wish to speak on this item, Chair Rogers.
All right, I'll bring it back and I'll look for a motion.
So moved.
And a second.
I'll second that.
All right, we have Rohnert Park moving and Katati seconding, just the way we like it. Let's go to Director Gurney.
Thank you. Just a quick comment. When I see Sebastopol, in these red letters like that, I'm always checking with my staff to see what's going on. I'm very sensitized to our level of performance now. And I want the board to know that we hope to submit our RFA on the Bodega project by August and on the Quick Strike project by September. We are delayed because of Caltrans and the review of environmental documents. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Director Fisher.
It wasn't a question, but this item is a report, so I'm not sure we need to take action.
I have it down as an action item still. So I think, Susanna, is the motion that you're looking for just to accept the report?
I believe that is correct. I'm just confirming on the agenda that we marked it as action, and we did. Yes, it's just accepting the report. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I believe that's what the motion from Rohnert Park was. Perfect. All right, let's call the vote.
Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Landman,
Yes.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
That passes.
Great. Suzanne, item 4.5.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I realize now on the staff report, it's marked that this is a report and not an action item, but the agenda does correctly, not confirming, show that this item is an action item related to establishment of an equity statement for the SCTA and RCPA. As you will recall, last month we had provided to the board a draft statement for comment and proposed edits, which we took the board's comments and went back and incorporated those into a revised version that we have for your consideration today. I would note we took Director Giudice's preamble idea and used some of that language at the beginning, made some edits to a couple of the bullet points and expanded on the footnotes related to the equity criteria item. And so would ask for either further comment or your consideration for adoption of the statement today.
All right, Director Fisher.
I like it. I would add one thing, and that's on line 3 of the preamble. I would add gender. So ethnic, economic, and racial disparities. I would like to see gender in there as well.
Any other questions from board members? All right, let's go to the public and see if we have any input on this item.
Confirming, I do not see any members of the public who wish to speak on this item, Chair Rogers.
Okay, I'll bring it back. And you did hear from our fabulous executive director that we do need a motion on this one. I'll come to Director Fisher first.
I'll move the item.
Second.
Any additional discussion?
That is with the, excuse me, through the staff.
Yeah, Director Lemon, go for it.
Just through the chair, I just want to confirm we are adding gender to line 3 of the preamble, correct, in this motion?
Yeah, that's how I took it.
Good, thank you.
Director Gurney? You are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I got it. I was muted.
I saw you doing it.
Oh, you were just right. So I have another comment in that first paragraph, the preamble, where it says to take action to create a culture of belonging. I'm wondering about the word belonging, and perhaps what we need is inclusion. Belonging is really a choice. People can be included and they may belong or not belong, but it's really important that we are inclusive, I think. And I just wonder what other directors think of that.
I'm looking to see if there's any additional input or response from directors. Is there any
belonging
interest?
felt right at the time.
All right, is there any interest from directors in changing that, in adding belonging and inclusion? Director Reynosa.
Yeah, I actually, listening to Director Gurney, I like inclusion. I always have a hard time with these statements because I see them all over the place, and watching us make actionable motions and actionable items is so much more effective than sometimes these statements. So, but I appreciate the efforts. And I prefer inclusion.
All right, I'm gonna check with the motion and see, would you mind having belonging and inclusion?
It seems redundant. I think we should choose one or the other. And I'd be fine with inclusion as opposed to belonging.
Okay, let's check with the second and see if you're comfortable with inclusion.
Sure.
All right. Let's go ahead and call the vote on the motion then.
Director Bagby,
Aye.
Director Corsi,
Yes.
Director Fisher,
Yes.
Director Giudice,
Yes.
Director Gurney,
Aye.
Director Landman,
Yes.
Director Rabbit,
Aye.
Director Reynosa,
Aye.
and Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And that motion passes.
All right, we're moving warp speed today. Let's move on to 4.6 for our legislative update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So there are some updates in the staff report about the status of several pieces of legislation that the board has submitted letters of support on. We have resubmitted a number of them as those bills have made it out of their house of origin and are now, for the most part, over in the assembly side. There were two additional bills that came up as ones that might be of potential interest for the board to submit letters of support for. They align with the legislative platform. Both of them are by Senator Scott Wiener. There's SB 379 that has to do with permitting and solar systems, because it sounds like the universe. So with solar energy systems, and the other is SB 922, which is an extension of the time period for which projects could receive CEQA exemptions for various transit and active transportation type projects. It would extend that to January of 2030. So those were the new bills. I did have a lengthy conversation with Eris Weaver about some of the legislation that she was tracking, along with a statewide organization focused on bike ped issues. And I think one of these bills came from that discussion as well, but those were the two I thought you might want to consider. And with that, I will turn it back. I mean, the other big thing is we're waiting on the budget to be finalized and see where things land with all of the budget surplus and what is going to be available for transportation and resiliency and climate change.
All right, let's see if there's any discussion or questions on the 7 bills that you've listed, plus the budget. Director Landman.
Yeah, that's a lot of input, 7 bills and the budget. I think I'll narrow it down to just the 2 new proposed bills we're asked to consider pick positions on. I had some mild concerns with one and some slightly deeper concerns with the other. I'd just like to share the direction at this point, for me at least, would be not to support them. And I'll just briefly explain why. Let's start with the lesser of the 2 evils. These are both bills from Senator Wiener. SB 922 expands the application of CEQA exemptions. So this was evidently a limited 2-year proposal from SB 288 with the idea of jumpstarting projects during COVID. I think it did have some limited success, getting maybe about 20 projects or something, I'm remembering from the report, over 2 years. But now it wants to extend till 2030. And I just have this little baseline discomfort, despite the numerous concerns and issues perhaps with CEQA about expanding exemptions to it. As I look at the support for it, I notice there's a lot of business support, the North Bay Leadership Council, but I don't see, with the exception of the League of Women Voters, I don't see a lot of environmental support for that terribly much. The other one is perhaps more problematic, and that would be SB 379. It wants us to implement for our city, reading the thing, at least for our county rather, within a year, an online automated permitting platform that would verify code compliance and issue permits in real time for a solar energy system. Very short mandate, incredibly short thing, and a mandate, again, with no reimbursement, because the bill says that we have the ability to levy taxes to charge for this, so the state doesn't have to pay us back. just look at it as another mandate from the state. And mostly though, I'm just not convinced we have a problem in this county or in this region really with the cities or counties slowing down solar adoption. I think we're all for moving it forward as quickly and ministerially as we possibly can. But at any rate, just my thoughts on that. That's the direction I'd like to see us go. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Let's go to Director Fisher.
Thank you. In response to that, I met recently with a solar company, both a manufacturer and installer, and I asked her, what is the one thing that we could be doing in Petaluma to increase solar adoption? And she said, better permitting. She said, well, Petaluma is one of the better cities. We are still not very good, which means everyone else is not good at all. And there are permitting systems in place. She told me about somebody who does that for jurisdictions and then connected them with our planning department and building department. So they do exist, and I would be inclined to support this so that we do get quicker adoption and, you know, and keep the burden off of the installers to get the permits because it is cumbersome.
All right, let's go ahead and hear from the public. Maybe they'll have some guidance for us.
Confirming, oh, there you go. I see one member with their hand raised.
All right, let's go to Eris.
Alrighty, Eris, I've permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
All right, thank you. Eris with the Sonoma County Bicycle Coalition. I do agree with the California Bicycle Coalition in supporting SB 922 to allow active transportation projects to be exempt from CEQA. That's, I think, going to help get more bike and ped infrastructure built more quickly. And I did really appreciate having a long conversation with Suzanne about what are the bills that the bike coalitions are looking at, some of which are not as, don't fall as closely under some of the SCTA's priorities, but there is one that is under the CalBike's watch list, or actually sponsorship list, that I would like to talk about, that I would love for SCTA to support, and that is AB 1713, which has been informally known as the safety stop. This passed both houses in the last session, but Governor Newsom vetoed it, so it has been amended to remove the piece that he objected to. What this bill does is allow for cyclists upon coming to a stop sign to treat it as a yield rather than coming to a complete stop if it is safe to do so. The amendment makes that applicable only to adults, because a lot of Newsom's opinion in his veto talked about concerns about children. This is one of those bills that is counterintuitive, and in fact, a lot of my members and other cyclists were opposed to it because they thought, how can this be safe to say you don't have to stop at a stop sign? States and cities that have enacted a similar legislation have seen a reduction in a particular type of collisions and fatalities in which bicyclists are rear-ended at stop signs. When we are at a complete stop, we have no momentum, and it is really hard to get out of the way if something's coming at you. Whereas if there is no cross traffic and you can keep moving, you have much more ability to take evasive action if there's something coming at you. And everything to do with collisions is very up in my mind. I was the victim of a hit and run on my bike a week or two ago, and I'm still I'm fine, my bike's fine, but I'm still sort of dealing with all of that. But at any rate, I would love it if SCTA would support that. But I have, and I, again, call for support of SB 922. Thank you.
Thank you, Eris. Next I have in line is Rick Lutman. Rick, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you very much. I attend these meetings on behalf of the League of Women Voters, but I wanted to make a comment that is strictly my own here. I agree with the comments that Director Landman made a few minutes ago about extending a weakening of CEQA. I'm opposed to that. I think that there was justification for weakening things during the pandemic, but I don't see that we want, I think it's a slippery slope to weaken environmental standards. I think that we should, that I would propose that you not support this bill. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Rick. Next I have in line is Tom Conlon. Tom, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Thank you, members of the board. I would wish to speak on SB 922 as well. Just to point out, and I'm speaking as an individual, but I will let you know that in general, Sierra Club does oppose weakening of CEQA in any way, and CEQA exemptions like this, and specifically issues around 922 were raised. And my understanding is that there were amendments made to the bill as it made its way through the legislature. And as a result, Sierra Club removed its objections to this bill. So I am sensitive to Director Landman's concerns. However, we do need to build infrastructure for safety as soon as possible. And we all know that CEQA does sometimes delay processes. So I would just put that in front of you today as well as you make your decision. Thank you for your consideration.
All right, thank you, Tom. Chair Rogers, I don't see any other members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
All right, thank you so much, Drew. All right, so let's leave the solar bill to the side at the moment. And let's see if we can put a motion on the table for the rest of the bills if we're all in agreement on it. And would anybody like to make a motion?
For just the other one, is that what you're?
I'm sorry, what was that, Suzanne?
So I'm sorry, you're asking for a motion for just the single.
Out of the two new ones.
Oh, okay, got it.
Let's leave the solar one off to the side at the moment.
Thank you.
So I'll make a motion that we support SB 922. And then I have a question. Presumably AB 1713 is not on our agenda today, so we probably can't take action on it. Is that correct? Or can we slip it in there?
I think because we specifically listed bills, we should not take action on anything.
It's not super clear how there's a nexus to the legislative platform, but.
Well, as a cyclist, and particularly now, as I ride an electric bike through intersections, it is a lot easier not to stop, I got to tell you, if it's safe to go ahead.
Yeah, I think we can definitely bring that one back, or if it's within the platform, perhaps we can still message it a little bit. But as it pertains to our agenda, I think because we enumerated which specific bills we would talk about and take action on, I think we need to limit it to those bills.
Okay, then that was a motion to support SB 922.
Okay, I'll see if there's a second.
Second.
With what I've heard from Mr. Conlon, I'd be happy to second that.
Okay. Any additional discussion? Okay, let's call the vote.
Director Bagby.
Aye.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Fisher.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Gurney.
Aye.
Director Landman.
Yes.
Director Rabbit. Director Rabbit. Oh, must have just stepped up. Director Reynosa.
Aye.
And Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And that passes.
Okay, and then was there a follow-up secondary motion? Director Bagby.
Sorry, are we taking SB 379 separately?
Yeah, that was the hope.
Okay, yeah, I have some comments on that. And
well, go ahead.
through the chair, if I may. Yeah, I realize that, we're all really sensitive to unfunded mandates, but this is a bill that I'm definitely supporting. And I know I brought this to the attention of my city staff, and they were supportive as well. I mean, one of the things that it does is it would require building departments to use the Solar App Plus, which is becoming pretty standard. I believe that there are some, I don't know if the county's using it, but I know that there are some either municipalities or the counties using it, in Sonoma County. It would require, I believe that the original version of the bill would require implementation by September 3rd, 2024, which, it's a little over 2 years. But more importantly, the CEC has an upcoming CalApp grant that will cover the upfront costs for municipalities adopting these systems. And the feedback I'm also hearing from the solar industry is that they're very supportive of it as well, because it really cuts down the permitting time. And in this industry, as in every other one, time is money, but also just knowing the status of your project and knowing your timeline allows you to plan and streamline your operations. So I think this is really something that I hope we're able to support today.
Any additional feedback? Director Fisher and then Landman.
Well, I was going to offer a motion, since she didn't, that we support SB 379.
I'd second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Let's go to Director Landman.
Yeah, if the chair will permit, I just wanted to get a little information from my colleague from Cloverdale, because you got a chance to do a much deeper dive than I did. I just read this and made here it is, the assumption. Looking at this would probably be difficult, expensive, and hard to put together in a short amount of time, particularly for smaller jurisdictions like ours. If there is an industry standard that's really relatively inexpensive, that's what I'm hearing, that there's a confidence, and your staff are looking at this already and don't see that as a problem for the community. I think that would be good. I would say, though, at least my reading of the packet, it was 2 years for much smaller counties than us, but our county, I believe, we'd be required, if I read correctly, at the end of the year. So that's something to consider. At any rate, I'd like to hear about that. That would be helpful to me. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And Tanya, did you have any additional information?
No, I was going to mention the grant program, but Director Bagby brought that up. So, yeah.
Okay. I'm seeing if there's any additional information that can be provided for Director Landman before we go to a vote.
I'm looking up the link right now.
And actually, I don't need you to look up the link, though I sure appreciate the effort. But if that's just the feedback you got from your staff in researching this, I just wanted to confirm that. If you have a sense of confidence in that, that's good enough for me. And I'm seeing that as a thumbs up. I'm seeing 2 hands together. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, let's go ahead and call the vote then, Drew.
All right, Director Bagby.
Aye.
Director Corsi.
Yes.
Director Fisher.
Yes.
Director Giudice.
Yes.
Director Gurney.
Aye.
Director Landman.
Yes.
Director Rabbit.
Aye.
Director Reynosa.
Aye.
And Chair Rogers.
Aye.
And that passes.
Great. Suzanne, do you need anything else on this item?
No, thank you. That's perfect. Thanks.
Okay. Let's go ahead and keep moving through our agenda then, and let's go to item 5.1, our executive committee report.
We did not have an executive committee meeting this month, so no report out.
Okay. Do you want to work your way through each of the updated reports here?
Sure. Sorry.
We'll start with, we'll go to regional agency reports and see if anybody has anything that they'd like to bring up. Seeing none. How about our advisory committee agendas?
I think Director Rabbit had his hand up.
Oh, my apologies. Go ahead, Director.
No, I was late, so it's my fault. Just a couple things. Because we have been involved here locally in the ad hoc committee, my committee passed $117 million appropriations for fare integration, mapping, wayfinding, transit priority throughout the Bay Area. So that's now coming to the commission next week. We've started the June and July annual allotment for transit. Napa is the closest North Bay that was on the last commission meeting, but that'll happen through the next couple of months going forward. Just at the bridge, I can tell you that we did pass our budget. Thank God that we received in this fiscal year over $118 million in ARPA dollars, including $75 million from the competitive ARPA allocation, because we're losing a little bit over $100,000 a day from lost toll revenue. We have no taxing ability, and it's the only money that we have, and that pays for the bus and ferry. And when no one's going into San Francisco, that really comes back to bite. Although I will say this, on the one good note there is that we continue to search for dollars for the seismic upgrade, which will be underway here in the next year or two. And we're making good headway finally on the suicide deterrent net. And, you know, just again, I think I might have talked about these numbers and why it's important. On average, 2 people, well, on average, let's see, 200 there last year, 223 people went to the bridge that hurt themselves. 198 were actually stopped by staff. So nearly 90% are stopped by staff. Sometimes the bridge patrol, mostly the bridge patrol, but sometimes the workers themselves. But sadly, 25 people did take their life at the bridge. So more than 2 a month. And all the more reason that we need to make sure that we continue on that project going forward. This was the DC week for MTC, but it's also budget hearings for myself. So I am here, and I understand it was only 94 degrees and raining there today. So I'm not complaining. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Director. Was there anybody else? Okay.
All right. So the advisory committee agendas are included in the packet, but we could move to the marketing and communications activities report, Mr. Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, please do.
Okay, we've got Ross. There he is, Ross Clendenin. Sorry, lost him on the screen. Take it away, Ross.
Good afternoon, directors. Here are the main topics included in the June marketing and communications activities report. Managers gave feedback on an overall marketing plan and budget for fiscal year 2022-2023. The plan summarizes outreach goals for the year, as well as details the tools and techniques required to achieve them. The focus on equity and overall community involvement is key to all strategies. The included budget, which is also in the plan, is based on an estimated future communications efforts and community outreach during the fiscal year. On June 8th, RCPA presented the Sonoma Climate Mobilization, a call to action webinar to the City of Santa Rosa Climate Action Subcommittee. The presentation was customized for an audience that is familiar with existing climate efforts in Sonoma County. The presentation is part of a multi-year campaign focused on exploring options and garnering support for future climate funding and action, building on RCPA's Sonoma Climate Mobilization Strategy. RCPA also developed a handout with feedback from staff that will succinctly deliver the RCPA message, as well as ways for the public to get involved and engaged in climate mitigation efforts. This handout will also be created in Spanish. A digital PDF with links to programs and resources will also be available, and these materials will be used for in-person tabling as well as in-person Sonoma climate mobilization projects. Looking at social media numbers, outreach declined slightly as we concluded the promoted post related to the Commute 37 program, and that is continuing, but going in some other directions, kind of pivoting to keep that going. I also want to give a special reminder that the time has come to confirm your appointments for RCPA's Climate Action Advisory Committee. I know a few folks have. Thank you very much. Each committee member serves a staggered 2-year term. So please let us know if you'd like to reappoint or if you have a new appointee. The recent email has nomination information. or you can reach out directly to Drew or myself. The due date to confirm your appointment is June 29th. And I will be reaching out this week as well. So please let me know if you have any questions on these or any other marketing, communications, or outreach activities. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Next up is the climate change activities report, and Tanya is going to lead that off. We've got a few items because you may have noticed we did not have agenda items for the ad hoc committee updates, and we'll cover that under these activity reports.
Thanks, Suzanne. And thank you, Mr. Chair. So I will start with a brief update on the climate ad hoc, the funding for climate ad hoc as part of the activities report. So the ad hoc met on June 6th and covered a couple of topics, one being some brief discussion on SB 852, which, as you may recall, is the legislation that would form a climate resilience or authorize the formation of climate resilience districts. And there's an option in the legislation that would designate RCPA as an existing climate resilience district. So we continue to track that legislation and looking forward to seeing that move forward. So that was the first item. Second, and actually, Ross, if you could share the diagram, the committee reviewed a draft structure that's being proposed for the climate funding efforts moving forward into 2023. And this is basically designed to be a way that community members can easily plug into the funding for climate efforts over the next couple of years. So this is definitely a draft, but basically the concept would be that we would have a community-led steering committee, and each of those steering committee leads would be responsible for a program committee that really is aligned around the various elements in the mobilization strategy. So we'd have a transportation committee, a building energy committee, land and water, and then an environmental justice committee. And each of these committees would have a chair and vice chair. They'd have representatives from the board, from our Climate Action Advisory Committee. And here is where community members who are interested in a particular area could plug in and provide input. There would be an RCPA staff lead and then government partner support. And then over here on the side, you see that we're also proposing a government partners committee to provide some of that program guidance, technical support to the steering committee. So we are proposing this structure. I would welcome any feedback or comments from the board, but again, really designed to increase involvement from the community in the efforts. And then kind of a connecting effort for this environmental justice pillar. We recently became aware of a new grant opportunity from the Strategic Growth Council, which is called the Regional Climate Collaboratives Grant. And a pre-proposal for this grant program is due on July 15th. And basically this program is designed to fund community-rooted cross-sectoral partners to form a collaborative and conduct capacity building activities that will assist under-resourced communities in accessing funding for climate change mitigation and adaptation projects. And so we see this grant as an outstanding opportunity for RCPA to bring in funding that would actually help provide support to this environmental justice committee and really help the RCPA ramp up our engagement and outreach in the community at large. The grant does require that we select at least 2 under-resourced census tracts and has definition of what those are. So we are moving forward to develop a pre-proposal for this grant and would be happy to share additional information with the board if you would like more information on that. So lastly, then I will turn it to Ross to give an update on the public engagement aspects of the funding for climate ad hoc.
Thank you, Tanya. And hello again, directors. The funding for climate public engagement plan continues with presentations to climate and community groups supported by slide decks customized to the specific audience. Presentations are currently scheduled to the Sebastopol Climate Action Committee and Petaluma Climate Action Commission in July, and just got word on Rohnert Park as well, so we're setting that up. Thank you. Progress is being made on an overview video that can accompany presentations and deliver a succinct version of the message on its own. RCPA is working with the Sonoma County production company that has existing footage of local beauty shots as well as climate change impact footage. Some additional filming will take place in the near future, and I'll be reaching out to the funding for climate change ad hoc regarding that. The bilingual climate survey posted on Typeform is still active and is being promoted at the presentations. The survey results will help show community climate mitigation priorities, as well as to organically build our contact list of supporters. A custom Sonoma Climate Mobilization newsletter will be sent later this month to contacts collected as part of this effort so far. The newsletter's purpose is to provide updates on climate funding progress, as well as to keep RCPA Sonoma Climate Mobilization on the forefront as we move towards future climate action. And at this point, I will pass it to BC to continue the report.
Very good. Thank you, Ross. And good afternoon, Chair Rogers and members of the board. Just wanted to provide a few more updates on work that's been done the last month by our RCPA team here. First off, wanted to let you know that we are partnering with the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, as well as the University of Colorado at Boulder, working with a graduate student assistant this summer who is helping us to analyze and review the existing tree protection ordinances from all of the jurisdictions around the county and compare those with some national model ordinances. This is really, I know that understand that the city of Petaluma is working forward on their tree protection ordinance, and we've been working with Relief Petaluma and in consultation with them, and we're hoping to kind of expand that work to some of the other jurisdictions. We also have continuing to hold regular facilitate regular coordination meetings between our staff and the staff of Sonoma Clean Power and the County of Sonoma's Energy and Sustainability Division. Tanya and I earlier this month also presented to the Sonoma County Transportation and Land Use Coalition on the implementation of some of our VMT reducing strategies that are within our mobilization strategy. We are also participating as part of the implementation advisory group of the natural and working land strategy. That's an effort that's being led by the Sonoma County Agricultural Preservation and Open Space District, in addition in coordination with the county's Climate Action and Resiliency Division to develop basically it's a natural and working space lands plan that will be very instrumental in our work around carbon sequestration at the county level. We also facilitated meetings this month on our members and partners, as well as hosted an electric vehicle local government partnership meeting on our greenhouse gas inventory that we update every 2 years. I am currently in the middle of that work and have been working with our transportation planner here on SCTA staff to analyze our VMT numbers for 2020, as well as working with staff from Zero Waste Sonoma on solid waste numbers for 2020. And we hope to be able to present those materials to the board in September is what we're aiming for release of our greenhouse gas inventory. And then I'll wrap up with just a couple of last updates on our work on the Bay Area Regional Energy Network. You heard from Jenny Berg at the beginning of today's meeting. This work RCPA staff does in very close coordination with the county's Energy and Sustainability Division. They've been reaching out to a number of residents throughout the county, trying to promote the greenhouse call service that Jenny Berg spoke about earlier today. They are also working to organize a couple of home energy score workshops that are tailored towards the real estate industry, as well as updating their home energy digest, which is really focused on bringing together the best information around the BayREN financing, the BayREN incentive programs, financing options, and other work that residential homeowners can do. And I'll wrap up briefly with just a couple updates from our Water Upgrade Saves program. Wanted to note that the city of Sebastopol has just marked their first anniversary in the program and have over 45 single-family projects that have been completed in the first year. The city of Cloverdale is just launched their program within the last month and has already conducted over 18 family site audits, as well as doing a number of promotional items out to all of the residents in the city, and getting great, some great program uptake within the city of Cloverdale even just within the first month. So that wraps it up from RCPA. So thank you very much.
All right, next up is, oh,
We've got a couple of hands. Let's
Yeah.
go to Director Giudice first and then Director Fisher.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to circle back on Ross's report from the ad hoc committee. Are we still playing around with presenting before mayors and council members?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
That would be great. Who's the lead for that this year?
I think that's.
I think Petaluma is this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, our city clerk, Kendall Ross.
Thank you.
I was wondering if we could get an update on the ban on gas stations in the county.
Yes, I can jump in really quick on that. So we have been continuing to work with a number of the jurisdictions. I don't have my list right in front of me. In short, 3 of the jurisdictions have passed bans that are currently in effect. So those are City of Petaluma, City of Roanoke Park, and City of and Sebastopol. Thank you. There are 3 cities that are currently under discussion. So City of Cotati is under discussion, City of Santa Rosa is under discussion, and Town of Windsor is also under discussion. And then as far as I understand, there are 3 jurisdictions that have not taken any action so far: Cloverdale, Sonoma, and Healdsburg. And then the County of Sonoma is the effort with Permit Sonoma on anything doing with County of Sonoma is really currently being, our contact there is Barbara Lee in the Climate Action and Resiliency Division. And she is really the point person at the county level who is currently working with Permit Sonoma to coordinate things for County of Sonoma itself.
All right. If there are no other questions on the climate side, we will move to the planning activities report. And I've got Janet and Dana who are both here. And Dana will cover the future of transit ad hoc as part of this as well.
Terrific, thank you. In addition to Dana, Chris will be joining us too to give us a brief update on data management. I would just like to draw your attention, for my part, to the Safe Routes to School part of the planning activities report and the fabulous work they've been doing. And like to keep this short, so who would like to go next? Would that be Dana? Dana, pass it to you.
Sure. Thanks, Janet. I'll give an update on the Future of Transit Ad Hoc Committee, which met on June 2nd. And at that meeting, the transit operator staff provided an overview of the phase 1 transit integration work and progress to date, as well as an overview of the phase 2 scope of work, mostly for the benefit of the new ad hoc members. We also discussed fare-free programs. First being that local bus transit governing boards approved 5 to 6 fare-free days per year recently. And the intention is for staff to coordinate with the operators to align these fare-free days across the 3 systems and support joint marketing. So the first joint fare-free day on the 3 bus systems was on April 23rd this year in celebration of Earth Day. Additionally, we discussed a second fare-free proposal, which was a draft proposal for the county's Climate Resiliency Fund to support fare-free bus transit for K through 12 students on all 3 bus transit systems. The application would be for fiscal years 2024 and 2025. So earlier this year, the county took up a discussion on proposals for the Climate Resiliency Fund, which included a 1-year fare-free pilot proposal for Sonoma County Transit Service only. This program ranked low on the list, but generated a lot of discussion. And so in the spirit of unification of the 3 bus transit operators, the plan and proposal has been revised and to be a joint fare-free proposal focused on K through 12 students for a 2-year period. And if successful, this program could possibly be sustained through Go Sonoma funding that's carved out for our Fare Free program starting in 2025. And so I will pass it back to Janet or Chris. Whoever's next.
I guess I can jump in unless Janet, you have anything else. Good afternoon. So on the data and forecasting side, a lot of our work has really been focused on vehicle miles traveled estimation and reduction and mitigation over the last month or so. So one thing I do want to highlight that's called out in the planning activities report is we've been working with consultants and a small group of planning and engineering staff from Sonoma County jurisdictions to develop a VMT reduction and mitigation calculator to help support the jurisdictions as they implement SB 743. So this bill is really focused on reducing VMT and reducing emissions. And so as projects are proposed, a lot of times VMT estimates will be higher than expected. And so there's a need to quantify VMT reductions. So we're making good progress on that. We're currently reviewing a draft and we're looking at releasing the final version of that in August and having a training session that will be inviting our technical advisory committee and planning advisory members to. So looking forward to seeing that move forward.
Okay, any questions? All right, let's move to announcements and then we'll do.
We've got one more, sorry.
Oh,
We've got
my
the
apologies. Go ahead.
projects and programming with James.
We always forget you, James. That's my bad.
I'll put him first next time.
I'm good. Closer's good, or there's a report to be read in the end, but I'll keep it brief here. I'll focus today's projects and programming activities report on our SCTA funding plan cycle 1, right? So starting with the schedule, it's shown on page 123 of your packet. Last month's board meeting, the board approved that evaluation criteria for project selection. And since then, the projects and programming staff, planning staff, and RCPA staff have all been working very busy and together to score projects. So those initial draft funding recommendations will go to the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, on June 23rd, our Citizens Advisory Committee on June 27th, as well as the other SCTA and RCPA committees through June and July. At our next board meeting on July 11th, staff will be presenting the first draft with the funding recommendations and available committee input. The project and program, or the project programming recommendations for federal funding will be focused on specifically MTC's One Bay Area Grant Cycle 3 that will require supplemental application material from each of the jurisdictions that have been selected for that type of funding, as well as starting work on their complete street checklist. Then we'll be back to the SCTA board in September for the next step, which would be a final draft, as well as recommendations to MTC. And then beginning of next year, MTC will make those recommendations for One Bay Area grant. And then the very last step will be back to the SCTA board in early 23 for that final funding plan recommendations to be adopted. It'll all close out, a year from now when Shauna does that report to you again for the federal project delivery history. 1 year from now with many projects added to it, as well as programming recommendations for all of the fund sources within this first combined call that we're conducting. And that concludes my report for the projects and programming activities.
Great. Any questions? Director Corsi?
Yeah, no questions. Sorry, James. I did want to circle back to Director Fisher's question about the ban on gas stations at the county level. This has not been on our upcoming calendar of significant items, but a majority of the board has indicated we want it to be And we'll be having that discussion on July 12th. I expect it will be on our agenda before the end of the year.
Anything else? Let's go to member announcements then. Does anybody have anything for the good of the order? And we'll start with Director Giudice.
Thank you, Chair. In my mind, you really can't separate environmental social justice from climate change, from homelessness, and Rohnert Park is very proud to have partnered with our friends at the county and the state level. And we just broke ground on Project Home Key, $14.6 million, 60-unit project. And I just wanted to shout out to Supervisors Corsi and Rabbit, as well as our state partners who are making this happen. So that's it.
Any other announcements from the board? I'll do a really brief one. I was talking to Suzanne about this. I was, as I mentioned, at a conference last week, the U.S. Conference of Mayors, and I had a really good side meeting with the executive director for the Build America Bureau, which is a partnership with the Department of Transportation. And specifically, I told my city manager I'd go and I'd find every single pot of funding that I could find. And so he and I talked extensively about TIFIA, the TIFIA program, and the access to funding that they have. They have loan programs where the loan programs can be the matching funds for their grant programs that they have. So it provides a lot of options. I thought I'd put it on all of your agendas to kind of go back and talk to your transportation folks to make sure that you're taking a look at it. The loans, they have $125 billion to loan out at about 1% interest rates, obviously changing a little bit these days. And he mentioned to me that actually they classify cities and counties as rural if they're under 150,000 in population, which is everybody but Santa Rosa. And he said that for rural counties, they can typically do the loans for about 0.5%, 0.5%. So this is one of the projects I brought back and talked to Suzanne about it. And I've been talking to my team about perhaps we can package something where we're able to accelerate the adoption of our bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And if you can tell me we can accelerate that at with only a 1% interest rate, I'm on board. So we're looking into it, and I thought I'd pass it on to everybody else who was on the call.
Mr. Chair, can I add to that?
Yes, absolutely. And yes, the moving the county downtown would qualify.
Well, beyond TIFIA, there is the Railroad Rehabilitation and Investment Fund, which is also part of the Build America program. And if you're creating housing and density near a railroad station, including a smart station, the loans are even better than TIFIA. So look into both of those. They're both well worthwhile. And Gerard, your city manager is aware.
And just clarification from Chair Rogers, were you referring to downtown Santa Rosa or downtown Rohnert Park?
Well, I don't know that the county's moved to either, so I just all right. If there's nothing else, we'll go to public comment on our announcements for the day.
Not seeing any members of the public who wish to speak on this item.
All right, well then, thanks everybody. We'll go ahead and adjourn today's, oh wait, we got one hand. We'll go, we'll catch Tom before we adjourn.
All right, where's that? All right, Tom, I have permitted you to speak. You may start when you unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry to keep you just a moment more, but I wanted to, after that conversation about funding opportunities, I wanted to mention I attended a workshop on the Portland Clean Energy Fund, which is a very innovative way of funding climate and climate justice activities. They've passed with 65% voter support, a ballot measure, which has placed now a 1% fee. It's like a business license fee on large retailers. It doesn't affect small businesses, small locally owned businesses. It affects the large national companies that sell things. And the funding has been targeted to BIPOC communities and others who are the front line experiencing the effects of climate change. So it's a very interesting model. something that we're going to be looking into for Sonoma County, possibly. They have about 675,000 people in the city of Portland. For comparison, that's just a slightly bit larger than our county. Thanks for your consideration today.
Thank you, Tom, and it was well worth the extra minute for that added point. With that, we'll go ahead and adjourn, and I'll see you all next week or next month, excuse me.